Hey everyone, I'm Paul. I lead the product team here at Intercom. Many of the best conversations about AI happen in the hallways. Over coffee, they happen in Slack, buried in Slack threads. They're fast, they're energetic, they're constantly changing as AI is developing so rapidly. Here at Intercom, for example, we're completely changing how we work to take advantage of the enormous benefits that AI provides. We've already changed how we build software. Our product and engineering teams and processes are unrecognizable versus 12 months ago. And now we're doing the same in marketing, where I'm spending a lot of time these days. We're not alone in this, of course. Other great companies are leaning in hard too. Knowing that evolving earlier gives you this competitive advantage. But this degree of change can be intimidating. So we want to bring all these conversations to more people so we can all learn together. In our first episode, we focus on Intercom. I'll chat with Des, our co-founder and chief strategy officer, about how we've changed, how we're changing. And in future episodes, I'll be chatting with leaders from other companies to learn what they're doing, what they're learning, and how it's different from us and the other companies that I chat to. I'm very excited for this. I think everyone tuning in will learn a lot, and selfishly, I'm going to learn a lot too. So hope you enjoy it. So, Des, both you and I have really high conviction that the entire bodies of how we do work is going to change inside companies. Tell me about your conviction. Where does it come from?
I think anyone who's played with these tools properly gets to conviction pretty quickly. And usually, whenever someone gives me this sort of skepticism or the cope that maybe this won't be a big transformation, it's almost always because they haven't actually tried to use any of the software that's out there. They haven't even a quick play with Lovable or Replit or Bolt or V0 or Vercel or Create or any of the tools will kind of give you a quick shit. Things are different now. Then separately, obviously, within our own company, we sell Fin, and Fin transforms the very nature of customer support work. So it's kind of like, it's really naive for us to have an attitude of like, we're out there transforming support orgs, but nothing else is going to change. Of course, everything else is going to change. It's already changed. It's just a case catching up with it, right? So I think, like, honestly, if you're listening to a podcast like this and you're still sitting there thinking that like nothing's really changing or it's being overhyped or whatever, like it's possible it's being overhyped, like 10%, 20% overhyped. I don't even think that's true. If anything, I think it's like not hyped enough in a lot of ways. But I would just encourage you to have a play with the tools. Try and do something you never knew how to do before. Try and get some research conducted that you could never have gotten done before. Try and build an app you couldn't have built. Try and create a design you couldn't have made, and you'll pretty quickly get to conviction, or you're really bad at prompting.
Yeah, yeah. That's the experience I've had. I've had multiple like kind of holy shit moments. I get like people are forever asking me. I go big on trying to persuade people they need to go all in on AI and lean in hard now. Like it's urgent. If they're to succeed and thrive, they're going to have to do it at some point. People always ask me for examples. So here's two that come to mind that were just eye opening for me. One was the first time I asked Grok to summarize what people were talking about. So I think I was looking for like I was trying to work out what some what are like the best minds in marketing. What are they saying about the future of marketing? Marketing's definitely changing. Like how is it changing? And so I just asked Grok, hey, give me like, I can't remember the exact prompt, but I was basically asking like, give me the top 50 by engagement they get, exclude these people who are just kind of, filler people. Here's companies that they might work for. Here's the types of roles they might have. Like summarize what they're saying. And Grok was incredible. And this is like, oh, and it's like you give stuff over the last 30 days. Like it's recent. What are the recent hot takes? Incredible. It was just an incredible summary. And that was just one. I was just like, wow, a human couldn't even do that. Like even if I asked kind of an analyst, hey, can you go and do this exercise for me? Like it'd be a very, very difficult thing for them to even attempt to do, like search across X for days on end. That was one. I was like, wow, that's not only amazing, it's kind of hard to do and maybe impossible. Then the other one is just deep research, OpenAI, deep research in OpenAI, where again, similar kind of exercise. I asked it to, what I was trying to figure out was, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, started the internet. What happened then? Like, why did Google was one of 20 search engines? Why did Google win? There was Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves and Yahoo and all the gang. And I was going deep into like, what were the patterns, trends? Why did the winners win? And it produced an incredible research report for me. I think it took about 20 minutes. And then, I asked it a follow-up question. Hey, please cut that just for B2B. So then it gave me the same thing for B2B companies. And then I said, 20 minutes later, B2C, and tell me what the differences between your first one, which is mostly consumer, B2B, and B2C. And within like a few hours, I had three incredible research reports, all summarized, compared. And like I was kind of reflecting on the idea that You know, it would have taken maybe a great analyst 2 weeks to make the first report, and then if I'd asked them like, "Hey, same again, cut it by B to V," they would have, like, quit their job. They're like, "Oh, I just literally did the other one," you know? So it's just, eye-opening stuff.
Yeah, and we can quote from here and go to like some great analyst who's going to say, but there could have been hallucinations in that report, Paul, and maybe it wasn't accurate. And then, hey, you realize for a load of these things to validate every bit of analysis in there is just as much work as doing it in the first place. So sure, it might have done it in 30 seconds, but like it's going to take you a week to validate as opposed to blah 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 blah. Blah. I've heard all that shit, right? So like the reality is you weren't going to do that, and this is like as in the work you just described just simply wouldn't have happened before because we our analysts are probably on more important stuff, and you certainly wouldn't have flip flopped to change your mind as much as you do, in a way like the AI is enabling all of your worst tendencies, but like the interesting thing to me is like if you think about the theory of disruptive innovation, one of the points it makes is that there's generally two types of disruption. There's low end disruption and there's new market disruption. I think AI is capable of doing both. In this case, it's folly to compare all the work and all the research that you generated with what an analyst might have done because they were never in the picture. Ultimately, you weren't going to hire an analyst to do that. So you have this new capability that yes, it might be flawed, but it exists and it works instantly, and you can use it as much as you want. The result, like I think folks who draw the comparisons, I think they often miss this that like some of just this demand is like did not exist before because it was just not justifiable or whatever. Like a version of this we see in Finn is people providing support in areas, countries on price plans that they couldn't previously have done it because now they can afford to do it. And yeah, like in that regard, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's far more perfect than nothing, you know? And so there's just an interesting thing there. Like I think a lot of what we're going to see here, it's not about the report you always did on Tuesday, you can now use AI for it. That's going to happen too. I've no doubt about that. But there's also so much more work is going to happen because of this. And we'll get to that. Like Bill Gates is a famous, I think it's a book or a phrase, probably both, called Business at the Speed of Thought. And if you just think about like, say you went on a Monday morning from like basically wondering what the latest and greatest marketing minds are saying about the adaptation and adoption of AI to knowing in the space of like 26 minutes. And like that's far closer to the speed of thought than, all right, I'm gonna ping Karen and get her to stand up some research and maybe in 2 weeks' time we'll check in and see where we're at. You know, it's a totally different world.
Totally. Even on the, 'cause I get the pushback too all the time, even on in the cases where I did ask someone to go and do the research for me and write the report for me. Even in those cases, I have to remind people like we hold AI to these standards that we don't hold humans to. Even the best human analysts make mistakes in reports. Like they like hallucinate too, you know, they get things wrong. And the other thing, that I do that I think mitigates some of this is I'll often cross-reference, like cross-check. So if I get deep research by OpenAI to write a report for me and they get it to summarize it, I'll use Claude to fact check it. I'm like, hey, because they're not going to hallucinate in the same way if there's hallucinations at all. So you can actually use these tools to like and cross-reference, and that's again similar to like peer reviewing. Like in science, when you do experiments and stuff, and people write papers and publish them, there's like peer reviews to check for accuracy, quality, and you can just use different AI systems to do the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah, there's certainly loads of ways to sort of solve. The only thing you ever have to worry about these things is you're going to get SEO hacked. I think that's the actual risk. Is like ultimately these things still learn off the internet. Like it's actually interesting if you say what's the best restaurant near Times Square to ChatGPT, it's actually going to give you an appallingly shit answer. In the same way that if you Google search the same thing, you're going to get whoever spent the most money to the dodgiest agency to hack the most keywords to get the right result, right? So it's actually what's interesting to me about like the nature of these LLMs is the more weird your query, the better they perform. The more generic and like to say SEOable your query, the worse they perform. But yeah, there's definitely good ways to cross reference and make sure. But the only thing I always encourage people is like if you're asking it for like the opinion of like the best product in a popular and competitive space, you're susceptible to whatever Google has already been told and whatever like the weight of content on the internet already is. So that's the only thing to ever watch out for.
That's true. Yeah, I do think about specifics and prompting quite a lot. That's where Grok is actually quite remarkable because you can be very specific about like who you want the content to come from. Like the idea that's kind of giving you pretty close to real time if you filter it that way, content by very specific types of people or specific companies, whatever. It's very powerful. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about building software. Again, like when I end up out at a conference or just at a meetup or chatting to people outside the building here, and I talk about how we've changed building software at Intercom and how we build Fin, they're uh, like amazed at the kind of details. Like we've blown up the kind of classic PM design or engineering triad. We don't really do that anymore. So we build software, and I say to them like, how we build Fin today is not fully unrecognizable, but a lot of it's quite unrecognizable to the way we built Fin even 12 months ago. So you tell me a bit about that. Like what I know, we made big changes internally. Like what prompted it? What's different about building Fin versus just building regular old consumer or SaaS software?
I think the entire software development lifecycle is built around assumptions, like the historic one, is built around assumptions that you, generally speaking, are working in a closed world, relatively predictable environment. Things will do what you tell them to do, etc. And so, like, if you're trying to build, like, an expense tracking app in like 2019, you talk to a lot of customers, you stand up a load of like a PRD or whatever it might be into like a set of requirements. You then go and build the features that you believe match your requirements, and you add on the UI that you believe will be usable by the target users to use the features to get the outcomes. You launch, and at no point are you like, oh, I wonder, will this work? The only thing you ever worry about is like, was my modeling of the world correct? Is my understanding of the user correct? But you're not like, they're going like, I wonder what that line of code where when I asked it to do two numbers and like take two numbers and add them together, you're not sitting there scratching scratching your head wondering, will that work? Whereas in AI, I think building anything substantial on top of generative AI is it's a world of unpredictability. You don't know what is possible. So you literally don't know, will it ever be possible to do a certain thing, or like will it be possible to do it to the degree of reliability that's required in the problem domain. So you have to first of all allow for total uncertainty in terms of what can be built, total uncertainty in terms of like when you prototype it, will it actually be useful? Will it be predictable and controllable enough? Um, Total uncertainty after you launch. Does it work in the wild? Like, we don't just throw Fin out the door and be like, there, job done. We don't also think it's job done when a customer starts paying for it. We don't even think it's job done when a customer is paying for it, using us, telling us it's great and getting great solutions. You have to check it in the wild. You have to make sure that it's actually performing. And that's true for all AI, right? Like it's because works on my computer versus works in the wild are two very different things. And then lastly, you don't know how to package it, price it, how you should roll it out, how you should then continue to iterate on it, etc. But even if you get through all that, you then have another challenge of like, how do I now convince customers to change their entire understanding of how to do, say, customer service in the case of Fin or expense tracking or whatever it is? You have to kind of teach them all of that. So because of all of those reasons, every way in which software was created prior to November 22 is probably a little bit or a lot out of date. For us, as biggest changes I think we had to make was like most companies who are or have survived this transition into a world of AI, you effectively have to build a new product. Usually it's an agent, but it might just be a new version of your existing SaaS app that's like riddled with generative AI, if you like, right? But a lot of it is back to 0 to 1, and 0 to 1 meaning this isn't feature iteration. This is brand new feature creation in this pre-discussed world of uncertainty. So one of the things we did was just basically built work streams around what we consider to be the core ingredients of the new Fin product. So, for us, for folks who aren't familiar, we wanted to build features so that people analyze Fin's performance, train Fin to get the most out of it, test Fin as in evaluate it themselves, deploy Fin in controlled ways. Every single one of those is a work stream, very, very flat. I meet with every work stream every week, twice, to review progress and to review product. And we basically, there's a DRI, directly responsible individual, a single person who speaks for the entire work stream and can make decisions across product design and engineering. And a lot of this is about speed, and the speed is extra essential. I mean, we always would have been like, it's all about speed. I think it's crucially more so when there's so much uncertainty that it's actually the speed of finding out what's possible, finding out if it works, and finding out if it works in the wild, and all the stuff we just talked through. That's where it's so essential. You just can't afford to have these like slightly long projects with like long like discovery or learning loops. It's too slow. Everything is moving too fast, including even the technology you're building on is moving so quickly. So I think a lot of the adaptation we make is about speed. There are other changes that we're in the middle of kind of working through around, say, roles. We're like, should designers code is a very interesting question in 2025, even though it felt like it was discussed to death in 2018. But like, what is a product manager? We had Claire in from Launch Darkly speaking with our team, explaining her thesis of this merging of all the roles. And this idea that you know, um, the more generalized you are, the more powerful you are in the era of AI. I think these are all changes that we're working through right now. And then like lastly, obviously, just the nature of engineering post Cursor, post Windsurf, post Copilot, or whatever is just a dramatically different world. And we've made big changes there. Dara, our CTO, has basically mandated like AI engineering adoption, and we've seen some interesting, I would say, early results. Like I think the increase in say PRs has been about pull requests has been about 30% or higher. And but I think we're still really early there. I think we're still just dipping our toes in. I know when we talk to other companies, sometimes it feels like we're ahead, but I think we're all just dipping our toe right now, and
Yeah.
we have to go further, harder, faster, etc.
Yeah, I have the same feeling as you. And then when I talk to companies externally, actually, in many cases, we're ahead of where they're at in their journey. But we're still just scratching the surface of the changes. The roles thing has been very interesting to me. Like you kind of said there, we were set up like many companies, very classic kind of software, product engineering team where you have a product manager with a specific role, a product designer with a specific role, an engineering manager, and that's triad, and then n number of engineers. A lot of teams settled on somewhere around 5 as the sweet spot. So, and then that's a team, and then the teams kind of group together. You have 4 teams, and then they're in this group, and they own a part of the product. And that world is very stable, very predictable. Like in Intercom, if there's a bug in the inbox, well, clearly it's the inbox team and the human support group, right? It's a very predictable, stable world. But it's also a slow world. Like it's a world in which, and we pride ourselves on being fast within that world, but relative to the pace of AI technology, it's still quite slow. A lot of collaboration. Um, but the roles thing is the most fascinating part to me, where I think they're completely breaking down. We have tools like Lovable, where anyone can prototype. Figma just launched a whole bunch of tools where like anyone can get into Figma now and start designing. And I think that generalists who can use AI tools are going to win. They're going to thrive and they're going to win. And these specialisms that people kind of hold on to dear, um, they're falling apart rapidly around us. Designers shouldn't code. Yeah, like nowadays, that question doesn't even make any sense. Should designers code? It doesn't. Not a thing.
I think there's a thing that's just happening around us. Like AI is just this massive convergent force that blurs boundaries and ultimately amalgamates things. So, like in a super scaled massive company, if you take something like we have to put a button in this UI, you might have like an interaction designer, a UX designer, a visual designer, a product designer, a content designer, all pointing at the same monitor, being like, here's what it should say, and here's where the shadow is, and here's where the light source is, and here's where it goes on the screen, and here's how we'll test it. I think AI has kind of like, and every discipline has this. I'm just picking on design to be clear. Like when you have front end engineer, back end engineer, I do CSS, I don't, whatever. That sort of stuff. AI is just this force that says those boundaries should not exist because the AI doesn't have them. And you see this happen everywhere. You see like the blurring of PM to engineer to designer. You also see it in the blurring of different lines of products. Like it's not obvious to me that linear won't also fix bugs in the future, right? It sounds weird, but like, isn't like, documenting a bug well, which AI can also do, uh, just one good Devon call away from the bug getting fixed in the future? Yeah. And like, when you just like, what historically might have been 3, 4, 5 different tools in a workflow chained together starts to become like perhaps closer to one. And I just think you're just going to see this over and over again, that like things that were previously separate were kept separate for reasons that don't make sense anymore. They were separate because even like take in the world of sales, you might have an RM, an AE, and a CSM. Why? Perhaps different skill levels, different tooling, different maybe pay grades, all sorts of stuff like that. Again, none of that makes as much sense anymore. So I think you got to see these convergent sort of forces apply in different domains and produce a lot of like say what might end up being like the great rebundling in a sense, right? We've gone so long into unbundling things into different roles, unbundling things into different products, that like I think AI might be the great reset there, where we realize, hey, it's actually okay if you have one interface that handles both prospects and current accounts and perhaps upsell opportunities. Maybe that's fine. So I think we're like we're going to see a lot of change over the next couple of years, a lot of like really hard coded assumptions in people's minds about who they are, what their skill set is and isn't, what jobs they do and don't do, what products do and don't do, product scopes, company scopes, org scopes. I think it's all coming crashing down.
Yeah, me too. I'm forever telling people especially those who most strongly identify with the career or craft or discipline or job title that they have, that they need to be incredibly open-minded. And, I also remind people, most of this is done in a kind of lighthearted way, but I mean it very seriously. Like, we made all this shit up. Like there was a UI designer and then there was a UX designer. Oh, UX is better than UI designer. That's a better job. It's a more like more holistic thinking of the customer experience. And you're like, yeah, but now we've product designers and not UX designers. And like, what's the difference? Oh, a product designer thinks more holistic with the product of the business. And and like we've made it all. This is forever changing. We've
All
made this stuff up.
invented. Like it all most of this started in like the early 2000s. It's a fleeting moment in time. There's like, I often tell people when I talk, this is a bit of a tangent, but I often tell people like, be careful you don't build a mini disc. And what I mean by that is like, the mini disc for like a 10-year period was the hottest product and the best way to listen to music. For a 10-year period, untouchable. And it's just a fleeting moment in time when we look back at it. We just think some of these roles that people have, how would you say, hard coded or tattooed onto their sense of self and their identity are similarly just fleeting moments in time. There was a period when software moved off the desktop onto the web, and as a result, you could invent new UI components that you couldn't really have easily done back when you're stuck in like the Windows Gray 95 style stuff. And in that period, there was a lot of creativity allowed. Web 2 happened and all that sort of stuff. And people went a little bit crazy. And then UX people and the whole concept of usability kind of had a second birth, or a second lifespan, if you like. And people kind of had to work it all out. And all these roles were created in that period. And they might all, like, a lot of times we kind of over specialize so much we converge it all back into product designer. That's certainly what we did in Intercom. We don't hire like information architects and UX and UI people and interaction designers and all that. But I just you have to understand that so much of technology is just fleeting moments in time.
Yeah.
Like fax machines were hot shit once upon a time too. Like every single piece of tech you hold near and dear. Like I guess the higher level lesson is just don't hang your career on a temporal trend. Hang it on a meaningful thing that's not likely to change.
Yeah. Another area that I see this a lot, this kind of hyper specialism, is in marketing. Like you obviously know this, Des, but for people viewing, like I'm leading a lot of marketing in Intercom at the moment, and my head's more in marketing these days than product. And it's amazing. I've kind of get my head in there, and I'm coming in. I have history here a bit, but I'm coming in somewhat fresh, wondering like what are the specificities of the job, and why do we have this hyper specialism? And AI is now, this like you said, this tool that like wants to just bring things together. And you see it, like, there's just hyper specialisms, and then there's silos, which require people to have, like, meetings and coordination, and then that just makes things a lot slower. And this is all, like, in the spirit of something good, which is, "Hey, we have a brand. This is what it is. This is how we talk. This is our messaging guide. We say these things. We describe our product in these ways." Like, we have all this stuff for Fin. We want people to talk about Fin in a very specific way. And so for, like, an event team to learn how to talk about Finn on the poster at the event, it goes through this like meat grinder of like people, roles, and specialisms, all with the goal of like consistent, high quality messaging. And I've just kind of like somewhat half baked. We're building this again to get concrete in what we're doing inside the company here in Intercom. We're building this new world where um I'm at least on paper, we're starting to see if we can make this work. There's some version of a marketing LLM in the middle, and like we feed it, it holds and it's trained on evergreen content, like our brand and our brand voice and our product information. It has deep product information. It has deep company information. So it knows about the company, the product. And then if we have a new product launch, we basically in product engineering and Intercom, we build a thing called What We Built. It's a simple doc called what we built, describes what we built, has some screenshots. So any product launch, we would feed this marketing LLM what we built, and in theory, you don't need a messaging guide now, and because in theory it will spit out, here's the web page, here's the tweets, here's the press release, like, and you can ask it for specifics, like, hey, make that more this way and make that less that way, or like, hey, can you apply this marketing principle that we have a bit stronger in this? And I think that we're going to get something that's 80% good, 80% done, whether it's a web page or press release, like we're going to get it 80% done. And then the job of the people, the humans in the team, will be editing. It's like refining, make it better, maybe correct some inaccuracies, and figure out why it did that. I think the job is entirely different. And so in that world, you start to wonder, like, if we have this centralized marketing LLM that's trained on the company, the product, and the messaging, what are the specialisms? Where what product marketing or like content or I think these roles for sure are going to change and adapt, and the nature of the job I think is going to become very, very different.
An interesting point as well is the pace of output, like about both the speed and I guess as a result, the magnitude of things you can produce will be quite different. So it's important to like make sure we're, again, to my earlier point about your researcher, we should compare like with like. There's a world where like you and your LLM can produce 15 web pages that say like, rather than saying they're 80% complete, I might even just say that I'd score them 80%, as in even after editing, you might never get them perfect because maybe there's some dyed in the wool assumption made earlier on in the process that's uncorrectable. So maybe they only ever get to 80%, right? Like, as in it's not like they're producing something that's like a fixed output and you can tweak it. But ultimately, if you really want to score 95 or 100%, you're gonna have to go back to a blank page. That's possible. That still doesn't mean that this is not a useful technology, though. And what I mean by that is I've produced 15 pages and your team can produce one, right? And so the question is, where do you draw the line between like the benefit of having a complete, rich, deep marketing website with like 15 pages versus year one, or like 15 different ads or 15 different, whatever it might be. I think like, we're not sure how all this plays out, but I think if you're not experimenting and if you're like kind of like genuinely sticking your fingers in your ear and your head in the sand saying that like, nothing's changing or you don't want anything to change, or you found one shit bit of output from AI and therefore you think that we don't have to pay attention to it, I think it's just a totally wrong approach. Like, whether or not, let's just say aesthetic perfection or like the perfect copy or whatever matters is actually kind of a company level decision for you.
Yeah.
Genuinely, like, some brands, like I can't imagine for a second Linear having like a bad piece of framing or phrasing or incorrect use of apostrophe or whatever on their website. It's just because their brand is craft, their brand is perfection, and as a result, it makes sense that they might say, "Hey, we're not going to use too much of this stuff or whatever." That's totally valid. Most companies aren't linear. And most companies are fighting a different fight and they've got different competitors and they've found different angles or vectors of differentiation. So everyone needs to kind of, it's not enough for me to say, oh, we care a lot about design. It's like, make sure you understand now the full implications of that decision before you refuse to adopt aspects of AI in various different pockets or corners, because it's now a full stack decision about your company, your business, your pace, how fast your competitors might move if they do adopt it, all that sort of stuff. You have to weigh all those things together. So it can't just be down to one person's particular penchant or kink for craft. And it actually needs to be a company-wide thing if you're deciding, if you're making that decision.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Here's one other example that struck me last week here internally, and we'll wrap up on this. We had a really cool MCP launch last week, and you can kind of tell people more about it. But it was really cool. Now, typically this would work as like someone in product marketing is told, you need to go and understand this new technology. Like, how does it work? What is it? And now suddenly you're like the MCP expert in Intercom, and you'll tell all the people about how we'll market fin and explain the thing. And now there's like a specialism, the PMM for MCP, and a single failure point in the dependency. So that's the way you would do it. Or what you could do is whip open Granola or another kind of AI note-taking app. I use Granola a lot. It's incredible. You go over to the R&D team that built the product and you talk at them for an hour. Uh, like interrogate them. Tell me more. How does it work? And what did you do? And why was it like that? And you don't even necessarily need to understand all the concepts, but you're getting all of the insight, and it's a live recorded quick 1 hour. And then Granola will excellently summarize that for you. And then you'll ask, Granola or maybe another tool. You might feed into a different LLM product that's better at it and say, like, hey, make me a web page. You could feed it into a tool like Lovable and prototype something. You make me the web page for MCP. And then that gets you to 80%. You do the 20% tweaking, editing, finessing. You put it live. Now there's a thing called fin.ai/MCP, all about how fin works at MCP. And then you can say, hey, actually, use that web page, marketing LLM, please use that web page to write me a blog post about it. Or, hey, we're going to have an event and we're going to have like print out A4 sheet, one pager on it. Write me a one pager.
And all of that's true. And like the genuine question, and I really do mean you have to be an open mind to this, is like somebody will do all that and say, hey, this web page is kind of shit. And the actual question is it better than no web page? Or is it better than the same web page, than a better web page in 4 weeks' time? And that's ultimately the question you have to wrestle with in so much of AI. It's basically the existence of Paul's research report today versus the hypothetical existence of where you want it to get to in 2 weeks' time at a slightly higher quality. Like, this is the sort of quality time discount trade-off that we have to make consistently. And I think a lot of people are refusing to make it, and they're protecting themselves by just saying, but I found a bug in the LLM, and that can be both true and not the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as all of these new technologies. The internet was no different. In the early days, they're rough, but they get better very quickly. I think AI is going to get better, is getting better extremely quickly. Like even the AI coding tools, like Claude, Claude Code is quite good at taking UI inspiration and building you something that actually does meet your bar for maybe like a secondary web page, things like
That
that.
is ultimately the point. It's like, if you believe that these things will continue to improve and become the dominant force, why would you not start learning it today?